Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Heretic Hammer Podcast. I'm your host, Marshall, and this is my co-host, Dylan.
Hello.
And today we are going over it. I felt like, one of the things I think that got me when we did our custom Space Marine chapter, right, was I was like, it's a bit of a twist thing, because really Dylan's only frame of reference for how all the legions, like all the Primarchs, Gene Seed, like all those OG legions, right? His basis of knowledge for it is just what we did in the second episode.
It's true. I knows what I knows.
Yeah, at least from the loyalist side, right? And then third, if it was chaos.
Right.
And that's inherently a big thing, right? Because it's like it's tough to gauge, maybe like to know, like, well, I would want, the Imperial Fist Gene Seed, because I would love it to be like really stable and have like a good, connection to Black Templars or whatever. Or, I would want it to be Blood Angels based Gene Seed, because I want there to be a light Black Rage kind of. I want us to have a Black Rage, but have a twist, whatever it may be, and I felt like we were kind of missing that. So I started to do, we did the Blood Angels episode. I think that gave us some good context for the Blood Angels themselves. But we made a choice that day, Dylan, when we made our chapter.
Mm-hmm.
And that choice was the White Scars.
Yes.
Which partly, honestly, we just kind of took off from my own personal love and interest in the White Scars. And you were into the vehicle side of things.
They got cool bikes.
Yeah. So today I thought, well, let's talk about the origins of the Bronze Owls Gene Seed. Let's talk about the White Scars.
Okay.
I know. Yeah, I know you are inherently quite interested in the concept of Gene Seed on its own. One of the things I'm trying to finagle with that is how can I utilize this without it to make it a whole episode? Because like it can get as simple as just being like, it's their genes, that is essentially a seed. Not a Gundam seed, but a seed.
Okay, but my understanding on the periphery is that there's also organs involved, and like in like the creation of a Space Marine.
Okay.
Where it's like specific organs that get added in, like perks,
so
and those are also involving the Gene Seed.
No, so and that's I think is maybe that gives me then I think a good frame of reference on how to do this episode in the future, because part of what every Space Marine gets a little bit of, like, every Space Marine gets added organs, extra the black carapace, which is essentially like a second skin that's kind of grafted onto them in some capacity. It is removable. You would notice, because, like, for example, in the Space Marine 2 cutscene, you see Titus without really, like, you can see his skin, like his actual skin. So like, it isn't a literal, but it does attach directly to them. It's an interesting thing that we'll talk about. But yeah, like a Space Marine has multiple things. And then the Gene Seed specifically is the genetic data of the Primarch that they come from, So for example, here, all the White Scars And you'll notice actually quite frequently, right, in the pictures of unhelmeted white scars. And you would notice this if we did an episode on the salamanders, is that by getting this gene seed, there is an aspect, it's not 100%, right? But there is an aspect of your, even just like your body that will somewhat change to be a little bit more like your Primarch, one way or the other, right? A great example of this is in the Pariah Nexus animation by GW, where there is shoot, I forgot his name. Not important. To this specific thing. He's an awesome space marine, but not important to this conversation. But like when you look at him, his features on his face have essentially like what would be the traditional, kind of Asian traits, right? Like that's what his, at least like it is on his facial features. However, he has attained through the gene seed his charcoal black skin, that of Vulcan, and the bright red eyes, borderline glowing, not meme way, but like just, bright, of his gene sire in Vulcan, including also a bit of extra height compared to other space marines, only a tiny bit, but there. And that's kind of a part of it, right? There is still clearly his personal origin in his physical traits, but he shifts some other ones after he attains the gene seed. And in this picture, one of the things you can kind of notice that many of the white scars can tend to get is the Khan's facial hair, as we'll start off talking about Jagatai Khan himself.
Yes.
As you can see, his glorious facial hair and long black hair. And it actually is even said, I should note, that many of the Blood Angels get the flowing golden locks of Sanguinius. Not all of them. Like, this isn't 100%, but it's just like, it is a thing that does happen. And yeah, they get his long flowing black hair quite I mean, look at that.
Is that also why the horse gets a thunderbolt on its face?
That is, so that'll
Or is that the gene seed of like David Bowie?
No, that's actually more related to a practice done by Jagatai Khan's like tribe that he was essentially, in a way, kind of, I guess you could say, thrust into. So let's talk about the Khan in his beginnings.
Yes.
So he originally landed on the planet of Chagors, a fertile world with wide open green plains, tall mountains, lush blue seas, very much kind of a very Earth-like planet, and especially feudalistic Earth, right?
Yeah.
I'm unsure if the whole planet was kind of a feudal Japan-esque style, or if it was just his tribe, or not even, I shouldn't say Japan, but even feudal, because technically he's kind of like based on Mongolians, hence Khan. So should say China, if anything, but I don't know, but I don't know necessarily if the whole planet kind of had that like design culture that, the Khan has brought to the White Scars and was clearly in his tribe. But one or the other, the planet was kind of in like a feudal state, like a medieval, or not even, I shouldn't say medieval, but you know what I mean, right? This kind of,
yeah, I get you.
No advancements. They don't have like black powder. They don't have guns. It's, it's all swords, horseback, boats. They have boats, but like, it'll just be like your basic sailboats. And inevitably, you can kind of show like what was the dominant empire at the time was a well-organized aristocracy called the Palatines or Palantinians, or I don't know the other ways to say that, but and they had conquered most of the planet, and were generally had done so with just highly disciplined armies, maintaining armored horsemen and tight blocks of infantry. So kind of a very like, that it's kind of that like almost, if anything, you could actually think of like a revolutionary era English and or colonial era like English army and like that European fighting style where they would just like line up with each other and just like shoot in a line and then go back
just
to
like a
reload.
formation, straight formation.
Like the whole it seems like the mainland kind of went to this, what I gauged from it at least was that they kind of engaged in a very rudimentary style of warfare. However, the Khan lived in an area called the Empty Quarter. It was a barren grassland, little resources, but was home to wandering tribes of vicious horsemen who inevitably just continuously fought each other over these ancestral lands. It was here that he was found by Ong Khan, OMG, the leader of a small tribe known as the Talaskers. And they saw Jagatai as a gift from the gods.
Ooh.
However, this would kind of very shortly lead to one of the most influential moments of his life. After growing up, I think it said he was about 10. He had to unfortunately witness the slaying of his, well, technically adoptive father, by the rival Kuraid tribe. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. Once, and mind you, him being 10, if you recall our conversation with us with Sanguinius, is kind of like being, is probably close in human years of being like almost 9, maybe like 18, 19, maybe a little younger, but like I think around that. So like inevitably he does kind of have, especially from like, if you think of it from like a medieval standpoint, what would be classified as an adult form. So he then took arms and led a number of his fellow Talaskers to move on the Kuraid and razed it to the ground, killing every man, woman, and child in a killing frenzy. So he not only took it personally, but really took no quarter. One would say slaughtered them like animals.
Mm-hmm.
The women.
Yep.
The children too. Okay. Star Wars joke aside here. It was from this though that he kind of took it to himself to shape himself into a man where he looked into being a man of fierce honor, loyalty, but also ruthlessness. He, felt that it is good to be honorous and loyal. Don't backstab somebody, don't betray people, treat others that you want to do to yourself. But those who do that or are against you will meet no quarter. And then from there, he swore to end the fighting and unite all people of the steppes and bring the end to brother fighting brother.
Good.
So from here, Jagatai attempted to move on to the other tribes who also tried to thwart his effort. The Palatines also kind of started to hear a little bit. See, the Palatinian Empire, they kind of left this island alone. They were just kind of like, there's just a bunch of crazy people over there. There's not enough resources for us to care. Just let them do what they want to do. They're fighting each other anyway. Who cares? They're just a bunch of, weirdos on horseback. However, catching wind of the Khan, they were like, maybe we should do something here. However, the ambushing party that tried to take out Jagatai Khan, could not handle him And the son of the emperor of the Palatinian emperor was killed as a part of the fight where they tried to ambush the Khan. And he's by like, because they kind of like got him to like fall off part of the mountain, and then inevitably he was by himself, and then they tried to get him.
Okay.
However, it was somewhat after this that, seeing kind of the amount of uniting he was doing, the tribal leaders of the steppes did move to name Jagatai the Great Khan of the whole steppe, kind of uniting under his banner, realizing, all right, guys, we do not stand a chance. Might as well join him.
Yeah. Yeah. If you can't beat him, join him.
And it was from here then he essentially take on the Palatinian Empire and unite the planet. So it's from here, they stepped towards the mainland, getting to, kingdom by kingdom. Many surrendered, others were wiped out. Finally, he reached the Palatines. He took to the Palatinians' palace in almost no effort at this point, with just all the allies he had, right? Like at this point, he's garnered everybody else. Like it's not just like he solely went in there and defeated the Palatines. Like think of it this way, right? He did the like Dynasty Warriors 5 Empires mode where you just like you've taken everything around the capital. And so with all of that army, you go in. Like
yes.
It wasn't just like, this isn't strictly like, as I've mentioned many times, Primarchs always kind of get some Gary Stew. This isn't just Gary Stew, but it's the culmination of more and more and more joining you makes you more and more powerful.
Right. Yeah. Strength in numbers.
Yeah. So at this point, it had taken the Khan only 20 years to take over the entire planet. I don't know if this means necessarily that it means that he's 30 from being 10, or if he is 20. I am unsure about this. This is the part I don't know.
Okay.
However, it was 6 months after after this that the emperor arrived. And the Khan and Jagatai felt that that the emperor was the one that would grant his true wish of uniting the stars under one great empire. And similarly, then here he would begin bringing his Terran-born sons to the culture of Chagoris, essentially establishing them as the White Scars. I will get into a quick note here, though, before that is explicitly. One free pre-Jagatai discovery fact was, as they were known at the time as the Star Hunters, they were the pioneer company that would discover Chthoniya and Horus with the Emperor, which thus would lead to them actually having a very positive bond with the Luna Wolves. But yes, it was actually technically the White Scars that also discovered Horus. Obviously, you can gauge on whether that was going to be a good or bad thing. But I mean, look, the Emperor was going to find Horus one way or the other.
At the time, who was to say?
Well, at the time, the Emperor was getting everybody. The Emperor was getting everyone one way or the other, including two that we don't talk about ever. And we'll never hear from again. However, yes, it was one of the big things that ended up coming with the kind of uniting of the White Scars was that the Astartes then also adopted the facial ritual scars of the Talaskar tribemen, while many of the Khan's loyal tribesmen were also allowed to join the Legion, which is a common factor amongst many of the Primarchs and their homeworlds. This is unfortunately also why Erebus became a Space Marine. We'll talk about that one some other time. But thus is kind of why you see the lightning bolt on his face and that horse, because this is just kind of a tradition to create these.
Okay.
It is like a literal scar, but it is paint on the helmet.
Gotcha. Interesting.
Yeah. Otherwise, sorry. The funny part though was the Khan, unfortunately, was kind of unfamiliar with the advanced technologies and tactics of the Imperium. You know, because he went from imperial medieval China to the Imperium of Man, which 30K pretty advanced compared to 40K, even for that matter. Like, we lost technology from 30 to 40K.
Yeah.
However, so yeah, this took a bit of a difficult period of adjustment. But he did form good relationships with Horus, and shoot, I forgot the other one. I didn't write it down. Anyway, the Horus one but the Horus one is semi-important for later. The bigger friend was Horus, and as it was anyway. Oh, it was Magnus. He made the two friends he mainly made were Horus and Magnus, and he was specifically not friends with Fulgrim. Specifically, Fulgrim did not like Jagatai Khan. Just wasn't a fan.
Yeah.
Which I'll find a note to make in a moment. But yes. The Khan thus obviously fully reshaped the Legion into utilizing similar hit and run, fast maneuver tactics that he had mastered on Chagoris, and essentially utilizing that to try to outmatch from speed all of his foes. And then the most important thing for the Khan was to then also lead at the forefront of every attack. He was not a kind of war master. I will organize things as they go. I'm going to be at the very front. You know, I will go into the most dangerous of these battles head on.
Oh, okay.
Where, like, for example, most Primarchs would still fight, right? They're all bred to fight something, right? But like a Primarch like Perturabo, for example, may be like, all right, I'm going to do all this stuff. Okay. Well, now that we've laid the groundwork, I'm going to come in, start working on this part to get this forward command center going. So I'll bop some folks around and then get moving. I'll move over here. You guys go over there. Like, he'll do a lot of manipulation where Jagatai is like, nah, I'm at the front and we're going and you're following behind me.
Okay. Yeah.
However, the important thing is they found no joy in just slaughter. They were only merciless when necessary or against a worthy foe they could test their abilities against. The Scars made no effort to show the greater Imperium them true selves and showed no indignation at their false labels. So thus, by that quote, what I'm more denoting from that is they essentially specifically were just like, we're not noting ourselves. We're not going to give ourselves any nicknames. We are who we are.
Were there any specific nicknames that like their enemies were giving them?
None that I saw. However, It's probably because most of those enemies they don't listen to and are dead.
God, I can't argue with that logic.
Yeah. So let's get to the heresy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That old chestnut.
This is actually where most White Scars lore exists. And so like really
interesting.
And they have actually obviously I've not read most of them. But I've been told that they are some of the best. The White Scars stories are truly actually some of the best stories in the Horus Heresy, like just from a character standpoint, especially. Like there isn't books that have the White Scars and the Horus Heresy that people generally don't like. But yeah, they're a lot more there than they were in 40k. But it is what it is. We'll talk about enough of some of the things they do in 40k, but this is a good chunk of stuff. So Jagatai Khan, kind of near the beginning of their heresy time, had spent a number of years in a campaign in the Chandak system fighting the orcs, which unfortunately this was intentionally prolonged because of the Alpha Legion being sneaky bastards. They love doing that.
Yeah.
However, eventually, because one of the things that the Alpha Legion were doing were essentially creating a blockade even of information. So they were hiding kind of just enough out of their radar where they weren't detected, but they were also intercepting anything that could potentially, because remember, messages in 40k and even 30k for that matter were sent through telepathic, astropaths, right? So all you need is a psyker to intercept a message and then not pass it. So
Not
it's
quite so
weirdly
secure,
easy. It's weirdly easy to intercept essentially a text message from your allies.
Yeah, whole lot of Zimmerman telegrams going around.
Yeah, a little bit. So that was kind of how then the White Scars were somewhat getting there. But at some point, one does get through, and they do learn of the betrayal of Horus and the drop site massacre. And specifically, they were being urged by Dorn to return to Terra. But the thing about this is, like, this is really preposterous sounding to the Jagatai Khan. Why would Horus do such a thing? This is crazy. We've seen nothing else to prove this. I want to know the facts here. So he's kind of in the middle, right? He's not necessarily just going to outright believe Dorn, despite that he has no reason to trust him either. He has no reason not to trust him either. So he's like, I need to figure some stuff out because, but one of the things that kind of piqued his interest was Russ had also called him saying what happened at Prospero, which inevitably tried to include, I had to go get Magnus by orders of the Emperor. And when I broke his back, he disappeared and they're all gone. They betrayed us. There was Zinch or there, whatever. There were the dark powers, blah, blah, blah. So inevitably he set out to essentially find the truth of the matter. In doing so, kind of ignoring the Alpha Legion that was pestering them at the time. Just kind of went all right, fuck you, and just left him alone and left. So the Khan eventually then went to Prospero to investigate for himself. Kind of seeing all the wreckage, it was then here that the Khan was confronted by an ethereal projection of Magnus, who implored his brother to choose a side in the war, but specifically not to trust the Emperor. However, it was kind of, I guess maybe the way that Magnus had spoke, that the Khan just had shattered the shade with his sword, inevitably kind of deciding, I don't think this is the play. I think the Emperor, I think I need to be with the Emperor and my loyalist brothers. However, meanwhile, while he is on the planet, Death Guard ships begin engaging the orbiting, flagships in space. And it was kind of within this then that the Legion faced an attempted coup led by Torgan Khan and Hasek Noyan Khan, who wished to take command of the White Scars fleet while it was at Prospero and join their forces with Horus, because these two were Terran-born White Scars, right? These were those original Marines. And they held, because again, remember, they first met Horus. They knew Horus longer than they knew Jagatai Khan. And even though they will, in many ways, truly feel loyalty to their brother and their father, in a way, they felt more loyal in promise to Horus. And there was just even throughout this time, there was a little bit of cultural tension in some matters between the Chagorans and the Terran-born.
Yeah.
So this is just kind of where inevitably it all manifests. However, they were dealt with, they lost, and the surviving traitors within the Scars were condemned to Sagar Mazan, which were suicide units that would atone through death by fighting, especially in great danger.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, through that, the traitor fleets blocked most of the good routes to humanity's capital on Ayutera. They were inevitably faced with no other choice, and they just had to keep fighting whatever traitor legions were essentially blocking their path. However, they did this in their way possible, which is through a hit and run campaign and inevitably a relative war of attrition. However, see, what's funny about what I'm about to talk about, we haven't talked about it yet, but in the Horus Heresy, there is an event called the Council of Nicaea, right? And in the council, this was a decision whether or not to allow psychers in their legions, right? Many saw psychers as a threat, specifically Mortarion and Leman Russ. And kind of were seeing some of the things that were happening to Magnus's legion. See, the Thousand Sons were inevitably susceptible to what was called the flesh change.
Flesh change.
Yeah, which is essentially just mutations due to warp anomalies. Which honestly, when you look at Magnus being Magnus the Red, with the full red skin and everything, it would make sense, right?
No, it tracks for sure.
Inevitably, he is a Primarch. He is going to handle crazy psychic powers way better than just slightly enhanced humans, right?
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, his gene seems to have a greater effect on those normal humans. There's not much to say necessarily about all of those true origins of the gene seed flaw for the Thousand Sons, but that's one of the biggest things that I've always taken from that. And thus one of the things then that ends up happening, or that you can look at, is the how the other legions, and for some of them, either became either for or against it. And inevitably, the favor turned to those who were anti-psyker. So librarians were banned from the legions. And thus, there were meant to be no psychic units in the legions.
Okay.
There's about to be a big asterisk. And one of the reasons I still look at Leman Russ as one of the biggest fucking hypocrites. And that is a couple legions, the White Scars and Space Wolves, very notably, have not librarians, but in the White Scars case, a Storm Seer.
Storm Seer.
Who uses lightning magic.
Not and reads psychic, lightning books.
Yeah, not psychic powers. They're using lightning magic. From the powers of Chagorans.
Marshall, that's different, and you know it. That is so.
And then specifically, the Space Wolves have rune priests, which use rune magic from their gods of
and read rune books.
Yeah, from their gods in Fenris, which again, let's look at the fact that they are talking about other gods in the atheistic empire led by the emperor who has banned all religion.
But they're not psyker gods, so it's fine. It's okay.
It's so funny to me.
Go back to eating your rune loops.
But yes, so the White Scars did keep their Stormseers because they were not librarians. No. However, this worked out in the White Scars' favor, as it was through the sacrifice of one of their great Stormseers that they would actually be able to open a portal through the webway. And they were able to use that to find a tunnel to get to Terra. This would now mark not the last time that Jagatai would face the webway. However, yes. So it was when they made it to Terra then that they fought with the Blood Angels and Imperial Fists and, engaged in battle with their usual hit and run tactics.
Like you do.
That's kind of one of the big things, is that the White Scars end up essentially showing up as realistically the third and really only final legion to truly make it to the full battle of Terra, or the siege of Terra. Sorry. As when the other loyalist regions arrive, it's a little bit of a too little, too late kind of scenario. I mean, it's literally like the arrival of like the Dark Angels and the Ultramarines and Space Wolves and all that like triggers Horus to like do the final stand and all that with the Emperor and whatnot. So like, because he's like sees the writing on the wall, like, shit, I'm boned the second these guys show up because everybody's left me. All my allies have splintered. Shit. But yeah, so when the inner palace was breached, the White Scars inevitably then pushed to lead an attack on the Lionsgate spaceport. And this is where you see some of the biggest, battles and fun fights with the White Scars. I don't know exactly where it is though, so I'm just going to throw it in here now before I talk about the Lionsgate part specifically. But one of the kind of funniest portions of what Jagatai Khan is known for comes in this quote where there's at some point in the siege of Terra, Jagatai and the White Scars are fighting the Emperor's children, or at least Fulgrim. And at some point they have a conversation, and it goes, the excerpt of the book goes, "He wants to be left alone," said Fulgrim, "to shoot off into the stars and hunt down Xenos on those delightful jet bikes. They're devilishly fast. I heard from a contact on Mars, Jagatai, that you do strange things to your ships." The Khan shot him a heavy-lidded stare. "I heard you do strange things to your warriors."
Damn.
Cue like
got him.
Sick burn meme. Because I mean, mind you, right? The Emperor's children have become the Emperor's children at this point, right? Like,
right.
This is after this is after La Fenice. There's some fucked up looking dudes around. Actually, and I think this is even at the point that he's ascended to demonhood. So I mean, yeah, he's not throwing any punches.
Mm-hmm.
It's why like one of Jagatai's big memes is that he's he's a roast god. However, yes, at the Lionsgate spaceport, Jagatai engaged in man-to-man combat with Mortarion, as the Death Guard were the main ones attacking / now defending the spaceport.
Yeah.
And inevitably, he did banish Mortarion to the warp. However, the Khan was pretty near death following the battle. It took a lot. I mean, a normal Primarch fighting a Demon Primarch, the Demon Primarch does have an edge no matter what, right? Because Chaos does juice you up, right? They will not. It's not just like he got stinky, like he's juiced. It was from here though then that the White Scars under Shiban Khan, Jang Sai Khan, and Ganzorig Noyan Khan. Get an idea of the names.
These names,
here.
Man.
So Khan and Khan proceeded to fortify.
Walk into a bar.
The port. Inevitably utilize the port to fight the Traitor Armada in orbit and provide reinforcements or give better access of reinforcements coming from the Ultramarines, Dark Angels, and Space Wolves so that they could easily arrive on Terra. Because essentially the spaceport, you can kind of like help create that extra guiding point in the warp to be like, this way, because, it's like swimming through a sea. That was essentially the last notable thing of the heresy. We'll get to one interesting thing with Shiban Khan in a moment, but that was kind of the big White Scars hurrah thing with the rest of the heresy, because then inevitably everything else runs to the Emperor and Sanguinius going on to Horus's ship. Dorn similarly doing his own thing at some point, fighting Fulgrim, which we talked about in the Emperor's Children episode. Anyway, once the heresy had concluded during the Scouring, Jagatai Khan does famously disappear. He was fighting a great lord of the Drukhari, and he attempted to follow him into the webway and was never seen again. Thus, we end up kind of seeing the source of why the Drukhari and the White Scars have some notable bad blood. Unfortunately, also post heresy, kind of leading into the 41st millennia, this is kind of where they start to lose a little bit of their lore. They're generally just kind of relegated to being like, and the White Scars are here to help us. Hooray.
and also the White Scars.
Yeah. It's like, they're not like punching bags, but they're just kind of like, we're here to help you.
Special musical guest, the White Scars.
Yeah, they're just like, and they're here. They're going to fight over there though, while our main character fights over here. So they not holding much for real, like, main characters. They do have an omnibus, called Masters of the Hunt, which I believe is notably all right. It technically, though, only utilizes 2 books and then multiple novellas. But they're inevitably the White Scars are like, they're prominently big fighters of Xenos still, especially, notable campaigns against the Orcs and Drukhari, who inevitably are a relative favorite of the White Scars to denote a hunt about. But that is kind of a big thing about the White Scars and their stories, is they're generally centered around the concept of some type of hunt, right? They view like these raids and whatnot, or like targets of note and objectives as targets of the hunt. However, reaching into about 1,000 or 999 M41, I had to lift this up so our stinking Fugies wouldn't block it. So there's a weird black bar on the bottom half of this image. Don't worry about it. I had to make this quickly. Anyway, given how sorry. In M40 999 M41, relatively after, I should note, not only after the Badab War, but also the forming of the Great Rift, Chagoris was then invaded by demonic armies and the Red Corsairs.
The Red Corsairs?
Yes, that's why you see Mr. Huron Blackheart himself on that right side of the image there.
Love those guys. Super chill.
Mm-hmm. I believe you are technically seeing the chapter master of the time, Jubal Khan, on the left there. And Chagoris, like I said, was invaded, and from this, essentially like in the jump in M41 here, they kind of got their shit slapped. It was just a lot at once. They weren't necessarily all ready or, kind of reinforced. And we're getting pretty smacked, but they did hold them off. And were saved by charges led by Corsaro Khan, which also might be who is imaged here. That's why I'm not sure. The images I have for Jubal Khan are not real GW images, and
okay.
So, and a lot of the images that I've seen for Jubal do kind of look like Corsaro. So it's tough to say. My guess, though, is that this is in fact Corsaro Khan. Notably because of the eagle that's kind of in the back there, and that is a special eagle that Corsaro Khan does have, and you can see it on his model. So that's kind of why I think it's Corsaro. Anyway, Corsaro does inevitably lead a charge to help out with the main planet of Chagoris, but unfortunately much of the Yasan sector that Chagoris is in remains in Red Corsair's hands. And multiple commanders of the White Scars are perished during the war. And we'll talk about this more later, but this includes kind of Jubal Khan, the chapter master, being what they think is dead, but he's actually captured. We'll talk about that in a second. In M42, however, thinking about this wrong. Sorry, wrong portion. In M42, Jubal Khan attempts to seek revenge against the Red Corsairs. So forget everything that's said about him being captured. This is when he kind of comes back. So essentially, this is like, I don't remember the year, but it's not long into, it's like 30 years later. Jubal Khan attempted to seek revenge against the Red Corsairs, pursued them throughout the Yasan sector. It was in this time then he was thought missing after a battle aboard the Seathnar, a space station that was commandeered by the Red Corsairs.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, though, Jubal was rediscovered, having been captured and brutally tortured by the Red Corsairs, which leads to a whole thing we'll talk about in a minute. However, while he is alive and conscious, there's many questions about his state. Before, though, we talk about Jubal, I want to talk about some of the characters of the White Scars. And first, I want to go back to Sheban Khan of the Heresy era. So, Sheban Khan was the first to discover the plot of the kind of betrayal on Prospero by Torgan and Hasek Noen. He led his brother aboard the Sword Storm to stop the conspirators from linking up with the Death Guard when they arrived, thus inevitably buying enough time for Jagatai to make it back to the ship from the planet's surface.
Okay.
So, like, the idea was that they were on the ship. They were going to let the Death Guard in. They're going to be like, yo, what's up, homie? All right, we're going to be we're here for Horus. Mm-hmm. Granted, I do wonder what they would have thought when they saw the Death Guard probably corrupted by this point. I don't know where the Death Guard were in that regard, though.
Yeah, what stage they were at.
Yeah, I don't know if they had been corrupted by Nurgle at this point, because that's all dependent on where Typhus was. Well, man, I can't wait to have that conversation. But yes, so It was from this, though, unfortunately, it kind of changed Shiban over a number of years. He became more bitter, violent, and lost his signature laughter. See, that one of the things, if anything, one of the nicknames the White Scars had attained was the Laughing Killers. And it
There
wasn't
we go. That's a nickname right there.
Yeah. And it was one of the things is it's not a specific, it's not like an evil or like sinister laughter, like, you know, a pleasure in the discourse, but just generally having a smile on their face for enjoying the thrill of battle, you know, enjoying a challenging foe. Like they wouldn't laugh when they're just like, killing the innocent unarmed civilians. Good times, good times. It was more when they would laugh when they were having a good fight. Kind of like very orky, if you will, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was when they were having a good fight, a challenging duel, you know. That's what would cause joy. However, he would reunite with Torgon at some point, and when they rendezvoused at Dark Glass. However, this unfortunately went poorly at the jump, as he condemned his former brother as a traitor for life, and essentially just attempted to use him as cannon fodder against traitor forces. However, Torgon would see redemption as he would lead the remaining what were called Sagar Mazan, those who remember the whole like penitent crusade ass shit.
Yeah.
They went on the abandoned Swordstorm to essentially in a feint designed to trap Mortarion. This would allow for the Legion to escape into the webway. This was part of that whole sacrifice also done by the Stormseer.
Right. Okay.
However, they set the Swordstorm's engines to overload, and Torgon was slain by Mortarion himself. The Primarch, I will though note, did state that he seemed to be joyful as he died.
That's good.
Well, and inevitably,
A little bit of mirth.
At some point, Sheban would hear about this. And thus, when making it back to Terra, would especially I don't know if maybe this was part of his, because he was plagued by visions of Torgon and another guy who I don't really know the full story on and didn't want to get into for this episode. And would inevitably try to seek. The concept was that he would seek reuniting with Torgon, and I think mostly it would just be with his family. However, in the meantime, Shiban, this helps give character to how the White Scars even just are in general. He eventually came upon a surviving Imperial army led by Lieutenant Cole. And specifically when he met Lieutenant Cole, he was desperately trying to save an abandoned infant. And seeing this act as part of his fate, Sheban pledged to not only deliver Cole and the infant to the inner palace to safety, and did so. Eventually, though, he did make his way to Torgon's hometown, where he met the last surviving member of what was actually the Sven Selen family, because that would have been part of his old name. And found a distant descendant of Torgon's brother and presented her with Torgon's sword. Thereafter, during the Siege of Terra, he adopted Torgon's battle cry, "No backward step," as his own, regaining that kind of bit of smile and laughter that he once lost. He did survive the Siege of Terra, and inevitably just kind of died, as most Space Marines do, either somewhere in battle or lost to time, or even some form. They don't talk about like them dying of old age. And like, I mean, Dante's like 1,000 years old. So I feel like there's not much pointing that they do that. So he must have died in battle somewhere. It's just where is not known. However, we should talk about Corsaro Khan. He is the current master of the hunt and captain of the 3rd Company. See, the Master of the Hunt is a title dispatched to someone who needs to hunt down a very specific enemy every 25 years. This is often done by the captain of the 4th company, but it was given to Corsaro, who is the captain of the 3rd company. Sorry.
Okay.
As far as I know, Corsaro has held this for a decent amount of time, so I don't know when he seemingly plans to give it up. Don't know that GW knows that either. That's a different question. One of the fun notes, though, during this period, Corsaro and his men were at one point fighting in they first were attempting to fight a number of Eldar, but then were taken prisoner by Necrons on the planet that were under Lord Zandrek. And he was trapped with the Eldar Ranger Illic Nightspear, who I believe is technically he's a ranger. So I don't think he's technically a Corsair. He's from Eondon. I know that. But that's all I know. Anyway, he actually worked with Illic to devise an escape plan. And while the ensuing breakout went well at first, eventually turned to disaster as they were confronted by Obyron, a essentially big enforcer of a Necron vanguard of Overlord Zandrek.
Yeah.
Inevitably, Khan and the Nightspear Khan and Nightspear, or Corsair Khan, were the only survivors of the battle, and inevitably, in a way, were essentially they had lost and would have died had Zandrek, who had been monitoring the battle the whole time, was impressed by Corsair's bravery and skill and allowed both of them to depart. I don't really understand this from a Necron point of view, but I don't know enough about Overlord Zandrek. But it's just like, it feels weirdly un-Necron-y of him. However, as somewhat pictured here, one of Corsaro's big hunt targets, and I think maybe why he has felt that he has not completed said hunt, is Commander Shadowsun. And thus wishes to make that fight at some point, as he has not succeeded. All right, now let's talk about Jubal Khan, who is not pictured here, but just a relatively okay representation, I guess.
All right.
So I'm also going to somewhat lump him in with Subodin, mostly just because Subodin doesn't have a whole lot to him and is related to Jubal in a relative capacity. So, Jubal was made chapter master of the after the previous great Khan, Kublai Khan. It literally looks like Kublai Khan. I just want you to know when you look at it fast.
I was gonna say it was in my mind. I'm like, you mean
straight
Kublai
up a play on? It's straight up a. I mean, I don't know. Is Kubla generally spelt Kyublai?
It is.
Actually, I've never looked at Kublai Khan before as a.
I'm pretty sure it's Kublai. If I'm remembering correctly.
It is Kublai. So they're
sick.
They're
5 points.
They just added a Y.
Yeah, they just added a Y. Shout out to Games Workshop. Just being how do we make this different enough?
Look, I love to give GW shit when they do this, but I wish they did it more, because this is my favorite part about when GW does this. It's my favorite part about Warhammer Fantasy. It's when they just take shit from real life and then just be like, and here's a little weather and it's a letter or something, and now it's different.
Scribble a mustache on them. Now it's our thing.
Yeah, and I love that. It's so funny. It's cool and funny at the same time. I don't know. I always like fantasy that's grounded in history a little bit. But anyway, the Kublai Khan disappeared while fighting the Dark Elder, like father, like son.
Like you do.
The apple doesn't fall far in front of the tree. And so Jubal was made he was made chapter master after successfully surviving the trial set by the Stormseers. He and 3 others had gathered at the Kumkarda Mountains, or Kumkarda, Kuhm or Khum, within the Valley of the Khans, Chagors. And only Jubal emerged. What the trials are remains a mystery, as none of them who survive are ever to speak about that time. You can kind of prep people in some regard, but you can't necessarily say what's going to happen. Then, while on Armageddon, this was, I believe, the 3rd war for Armageddon, they were assigned to the Deadlands. In one instance, they destroyed an entire orc brigade without taking any losses or firing a single shot. Presumably, this is done through isolating the orcs and from their supplies and reinforcements, and then just like chop them down.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, unfortunately, he was horrifically wounded in the battle for Chagorus, and now is in a life support cradle and shows no extra signs of recovery. He's able to speak and, he's able to think and speak and whatever, but he's essentially staring down the coffin of a dreadnought, He's got one foot in the dreadnought. So he's just essentially kind of getting some leeway at the moment because he is the chapter master. And he's got important shit to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because they are helping with the Indominus Crusade. It's just, again, it's in that realm of like, and they're here to help. So Jubal understands that he faces pretty imminent death. So he has decided to prepare first Brotherhood captain. So it's like the captain of like his honor guard, his like essentially what was his right hand man, to be his successor, and that is Subodin Khan.
Subodin, okay.
Yes, as he has thus named him master of the War Council, and essentially is trying to give him as much of his experience as he can before either passing or going into Dreadnought. And as you can see by the new model that looks super cool, Subodin
cool
has model, yeah. He rides atop a grav bike. He's called Thunder, which the grav bike, I'm wondering if it's going to become more prominent in the near future. Again, I cannot state this enough. I will die on the hill until 11th edition comes out. I firmly believe one way or the other, they may not put White Scars directly on the box, but I think it's going to be Space Marines versus Drukhari for the launch box, because Drukhari is going to get a big range update that they desperately need.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to do a bunch of bikes, and one way or the other, White Scars are going to be prominently in the lore for the beginning of the launch, but they may put the Blue Boys on the box itself.
Okay.
I think they shouldn't. If they're pansies if they do that, if they put the Blueberry Boys on there. Mm-hmm. But this is I've said this since we did our Drukhari episode, and I will continue to say it as it's gaining a lot more momentum in the Warhammer community that this might be a reality. So I want it to just be known. I have been on this hill for like over a year now.
Uh-huh. Hey, I have a gripe.
Yes.
You said that he named his grav bike Thunder.
Yes.
So why is there no lightning bolt anywhere on this grav bike?
I don't know what they did on the other side that GW painted here. You're supposed to kind of see like from the front, there's kind of the jaggedy, like lightning-y kind of thing.
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe if they put more of a defined, maybe they put the White Scars logo, like a transfer sheet there. I think they took this angle specifically because A, they felt that this was the golden angle. But then B, if they just put it on the other side when they originally painted this, but they just felt this angle was better for selling the model.
Okay.
It is, however, equipped with an onslaught Gatling cannon, and he personally wields Stormtooth, a power lance. Which is a weapon that was bestowed upon the chapter's first cons for millennia. So this is kind of, I think, a gift from Jubal. And otherwise, the rest of his lore is just kind of, he fought multiple wards and did good. As is the case with much of the White Scars. You know, it's just like, because like, yeah, I could technically go over a bunch of battles they've done and they've succeeded in and whatnot. But
hey, man, honestly,
it's just like, hey, we fought somewhere and won. Hooray.
That's not the worst thing for your lore. Like we've seen countless times how some people have had their lore go very, very south and they, you know, meet very bad ends. So I feel like just being in a state of like, and they continued to do some fights and they're doing pretty okay, all things considered. Like that's not too bad in the world.
Yeah, and a reminder, you know, the White Scars kind of bank on you not knowing more about them.
Right.
You know, they want you to think that they're nothing because that will surprise you when you see how deadly they are.
Yeah, they want you to underestimate them.
Yes. So that unfortunately doesn't placate well to like a lot of people becoming your fan. But I mean, look, they're the fast vehicle Space Marines. You'll love them just like based on that alone, right? Everything else can come in stride, you know? I will note though, that'll come across. I really want to get my hands on Suboden Khan specifically because this is essentially exactly how we described our chapter master for the Bronze Owls to be. So I just want to get him, put a little cataphracti like plates on like his shoulder pads or something, and then like be like, there he is, chapter master of the Bronze Owls. But yes, that is basically it for the White Scars.
Man, they're still so cool. They're really cool to me. And I think it's, like I say, I know we started it off like, you know, I really like the bikes, and I do. Like, that's, you know, it's a very superficial thing, but it's, you know, kind of, it's not wrong. But also just like the whole hierarchy of the cons, I feel like makes them really, obviously it's like borrowing from a lot of our own human history, you know? There are clearly a lot of cases where in creating this history they took, like with the name of Kublai, where it's like, all right, let's just scratch off this letter here, let's just add this thing here. There's a lot of that going on, but it does make it kind of stand out from like the other Primarchs histories in a really cool way.
Yeah, I mean, with a lot of Primarchs, you'll notice some type of like historical influence. You know, like if we talk about Gilliman, you'll see the Roman Empire, you know.
Yeah.
When we did talk a little bit about, you know, the Lion, you know, he came from essentially like an Arthurian era-esque world, you know, medieval world. Granted, Arthur isn't history, but like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Our stories in that sense. But yeah, I think it's such a good point. But like the thing, right? Yeah, it's like the silly things get you in the door, and then you're like, hey, there's some extra to this than I thought, even if there's not a lot.
Also, red and white is a cool color combination. Always has been. Always it will be. It's just a really cool color combination.
Well, and it's just like, especially to me, like the like accent pieces that they do a lot of the time as well, like I think are just so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think they just make for awesome accents and are just so incredibly like underrated. Unfortunately, white is a real bitch to paint. So it's not everybody's favorite army to paint. It's kind of like the Imperial Fists, but I think the Imperial Fists get a lot of fans because of the Horus Heresy.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, yeah, I mean, like the accenting, the whole White Scar thing, you can just play with a lot of stuff, and it's just so cool.
You know what also does it for me that doesn't actually make sense at all?
Sure.
But it's something about the white scars where it's like the exception.
Yeah.
And I don't really, it's the white scars are the ones that made me think about this because of the presence, the like overwhelming presence of white in their color scheme. When these artists, they, draw and paint and illustrate all of these like images and pictures of the various Space Marines in combat. When I'm looking at like the image we're looking at here right now, it occurs to me that like here in the middle of battle in this like extremely heated conflict, they should just be like, their armor should just be covered in like grime and dirt. But I love the idea that I don't think is intentional per se, but it's this, with the white and the red, it's so bold. It's not like a faded white or like a darker red. It's like a super bright white. The red is really bright as well. Like it pops. They're not like taking the time to be like, let's put some mud or dirt on it. It's almost as if they're just arriving on the battlefield at all times that I see them. And their colors are just so like bright and iconic and stand out so much. And I feel like on other Space Marines, it would be weird to me for them to look so like clean and bold and like the armor doesn't look like scratched or anything or show any signs of like battle damage. But with the white scar specifically, I look at it, I'm like, yeah, that's part of what makes them stand out is that they almost look like polished, like they're, despite being in battle, they don't actually look like they're taking any damage or anything.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, even just look at this, right? Like, I mean, there's some damage on Corsaro Khan there, but he's still like, you wouldn't notice a lot of it.
And like the reds and the white, like it's interesting here. Like they take the point. You can see where the sun, where the light from the sun is coming in on his right pauldron. And a lot of like the rest of his armor is in shadow. But you can still tell, like you're still getting a sense of how like bright of a white the armor has been painted in. And like the reds aren't like a very dark red. They're very, very bright as well, very pronounced. I think that's like really cool.
Yeah, and I mean look at the white gauntlet on Cave and Shrike there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like Shrike's like it's not even, doesn't have just the blood, but there's like also like this like oil coming from where the pipe leads that's like spilled onto the white. Like he's black, but he's got this grimier look to his helmet and everything where like, Corsaro has some scuffs, but like the the armor is generally pretty still bright and noticeable.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that is all for the white scars. I've got nothing else for us.
All right. Well, there's nothing else we can do. No backward steps, right?
No backward steps. So from that point, tune in next week as we will talk about something.
We'll work it out.
You know what it won't be, unfortunately.
What?
It won't. It will unfortunately not be Thankwell, the horned rat's funny, silliest clown thing, fighting as tough as hard as battle fights. It will not be that.
Why must you dangle these carrots in front of my nose?
Because it's unfortunately fantasy / AOS now.
Yes.
So, but we will surely talk. I mean, I don't know. It might be a good time to talk about maybe what makes a Space Marine next week. Otherwise, I think it's always, I'd like to space out my Space Marines a
You
little.
like to space.
So yeah, we'll come into that next week. Otherwise,
Okay.
see you next time.
Kublai.